What would you say to your 12-year-old self? This simple yet profound question has sent me on a journey back to childhood to find healing for today. I'm Mike Nicholson, a lifelong educator with over 25 years devoted to young minds. I'm here to celebrate those dedicated to the service of young people and to delve into how they navigate their personal healing amidst the childhood pain they witness in their daily lives. Together, we forge actionable steps to kickstart the healing journey for the young people of today. Join me as I speak with teachers, mental health professionals, coaches, and more, and uncover the wisdom they would share with their 12-year-old selves. Together, we strive to build a foundation for healing that many of us never had. So what would you say to your 12-year-old self? Special note before starting, this podcast is in no way intended to take the place of any kind of mental health assistance. We are simply having discussions about healing and learning and growing. If you need mental health attention, please seek a professional. Hello and welcome back to your 12-year-old self. My guest today is Jenna Rykiel. Jenna Rykiel is a business and mindset coach for aspiring mom entrepreneurs. She empowers moms to build thriving businesses without burning out. She helps ambitious moms to design a life they truly love by teaching them to optimize their time, create more freedom and flexibility in their lives, and make money on their own terms without sacrificing their self-care in the process. She's the host of the podcast, How to Quit Your Job, a mom's guide to creating a life and business you love, which equips moms who are new to entrepreneurship with practical business tips, mindset shifts, and the actionable guidance they need to ditch their 9-to-5 and step into entrepreneurship with courage and confidence, all while juggling family life. So Jenna was introduced to me by somebody who I am so fond of. She's a very good friend of my wife named Rachel. And when I spoke to her about your 12-year-old self, she was excited to introduced me to Jenna, and I can see why. Jenna is sharp, smart, driven, and most importantly for what I'm trying to do is she literally, what I can tell, is trying to change the world one mom at a time, and I just really respect that. And I really enjoy talking to her because it gives me a whole different perspective on the fight we all have, the fight we're all having, so to speak, to live our best lives and make the next best choice and serve ourselves while serving others. So yeah, it was a great perspective and a great conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Here's Jenna Rykiel. Jenna Rykiel, thank you for joining me on your 12-year-old self. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. As I said in the opening, you were kind of introduced to me by a mutual friend who I love dearly. And I couldn't wait to meet you, if for no other reason than that. So I'm really, really excited. And I want to start, like I start every one of my episodes, by asking you, tell me about your life at 12 years old.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because it's harder to think about it as 12 years old, and it's easier to what grade was I in, because
sixth or seventh. Yeah.
Yeah. It's such a definitive, that triggers so many more memories, and that, just the school environment is just such an easier way to think about it. But yeah, at 12, I was in middle school. Middle school, I feel like, is such a tough time for kids. There's just so much, trying to fit in and trying to belong. Luckily, I did have two older sisters, well, for better or worse, two older sisters who, I did feel like a sense of protection, or at least a sense of belonging within family. But, you're always trying to make your own way and fit in. And, it's brutal thinking about some of the ways that you sort of try and fit in, and you try and find your your group of friends at that time. So some of the other things that stick out for me. So I was always in sports, always a straight A student, which on the surface, definitely sounds like a really great thing. But it was a lot of pressure, and not pressure that my parents necessarily put on me, but just pressure that I put on myself.
Can I ask you a question? I'm
To
sorry to cut you off.
Yeah.
Why do you think you put that pressure on yourself? Because just so you know, I worked at a middle school as a vice principal for about 10 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have my heart goes out to anybody in middle school. If anybody sat
Mm-hmm.
on this and told me it was easy, I would know they're lying. But why the pressure? Because I watched kids over the years with that pressure, I felt for those straight A students, and I had conversations with parents where they couldn't put their finger on why the pressure. Why do you think?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you ask that because through therapy, I figured it out. And it was actually with a therapist who does like Freudian psychotherapy, like talk therapy, which I at the time was like, and I have a mental health background, so I have a counseling psychology background. And at the time I was like, oh, this is so expensive, such a waste of time. And there are so many things that I've taken from seeing that therapist or actually psychiatrist for the length of time that I did. And one of the things that came up was this sort of comparison to my sisters, right? And it's being the youngest of three and always wanting to, there was that sense of belonging and wanting to, we always joked in my family, like Jenna was trying to run with the big dogs, like there's that big dog brand and I love dogs. So it was always like Jenna's trying to run with the big dogs, but I was always younger and I was always trying to fit in, or I was always trying to compete, sports and also other things. And I remember so vividly that I would get straight A's and my sisters would say, well, that's because elementary school is so much easier, right? Or like the grade you're in is so much easier. Just wait till you get to this next grade. And I was like, I'm going to prove that when I get to that next grade, that I can get straight A's. And it's one of those things that then it just becomes habit, right? Then it just
Yep.
becomes like B's are unacceptable. And even my parents were like, Jenna, it's okay to get a B. And I'm like, no, it's not. And then it dwindles and it becomes not about my sisters anymore. But through therapy, it was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly why I am so competitive.
It's no picnic being the youngest. I'm the youngest of
Yeah.
five, so I get it. That's so interesting to me. So you said it's interesting to me, first of all, that when I asked about being 12, is that school popped into your head, right? Because not
Mm-hmm.
everyone does that. So it makes me wonder, like, what was your experience like when you think back? Yes, you had straight A's and you did sports and everything, but what was your experience like? Did you call it being overall very positive, or was that pressure something that kept you from enjoying it?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because, I think that my experience in school was probably better than most, I would say. But actually, as my husband and I, we have a 1.5-year old, as we're talking about school for him, my husband and I are always reflecting on the experience. And we just constantly talk about how even if it has been, an overall positive experience, it's just like there's so many little things about that environment that um that we don't know that we want for our son to have to navigate. And certainly my husband and I, we had very different school experiences and we both made it out okay. um but thinking back to that journey and what school is all about, the traditional public school kind of uh, priorities, it's something that we really look at and we question, like, is that what we want for our son? So
So your husband, he doesn't have a public school background then?
he does.
Oh, he does.
Hmm.
Okay.
He went to private school for 1 year and didn't like it, and so he stayed in public school. But we just had we were very different kids in in our experience. I guess like when you think about the typical or stereotypical groups that we would have been a part of, it is very different, but still a similar experience of just really it being tough.
What do you mean tough? The peer pressure, the bullying, like what is it that's tough that you think of? Like what is it that gives you pause about sending your son to a public school?
Yeah, so I think the things it there's a little bit of two different answers, I would say. The tough part, I think, is a bit more of this focus on the social aspect and the I know in middle school for me it was like, let me just fly under the radar. Let me just do what I need to do, put my head down. There were a lot of like fights and things like that, and bullying. I wasn't a necessarily a target of bullying, but I think it's because I knew to stay under the radar, knew not to kind of ruffle feathers. I had a few pretty great friends who were much bigger than me and kind of could have my back. So I, kind of kept those folks close. But for our son, it's sort of like the focus on tests and the focus away from play, especially in elementary school, where there's and my husband has done a lot of reading about it and learning about it, and this idea that people or kids like dislike school, thinking that that's just normal, but he really believes it doesn't have to be that way, right? And really what he's shared with me through his research is just like sometimes the way that these systems are set up, it does promote this really dislike for the school and the learning environment when it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. We could really really like learning, and my husband and I both, like as adults, we love learning, but when we were in school, it was for me it was to get the grade, and for him it was like just to like he hated it all around. So it's so interesting. We wish we had this zest for learning when we were in middle school and high school.
So you just triggered me in that I could go off now for the next hour and a half about everything you just spoke about. And when I started this podcast, I didn't want to just be disparaging about public schools, because but I know the ins and outs of them. I know the failures of them, and I know the successes of them. I know that every person generally that works in a public school loves kids, right? Teachers love kids, but institutions are just too slow to change. And I wish I could disagree with you, because it was my life for so long. My wife, it's her life. It's just an amazing conversation to me, because there's this, it's so clear. There's a system that says, here's how we do it. And that's probably your concern, right? And I do academic coaching. I have an academic coaching business, and every one of my sales calls or whatever is the problem with schools. It's a one size fits all. And there's not, and it's nobody that works in these schools wants to let students fall through the cracks. Nobody wouldn't hug every kid who needs it if they could. The limits of the institution have gotten so restrictive and so test forward and test oriented. So yes, I feel very deeply everything you're saying. I feel for your husband, because he's clearly, obviously, a guy who was an intelligent young man, but hated school, right? That's what it sounds like. You know what that
Absolutely.
means? That means they didn't know how to teach him. And it's not their fault. It's just, it's an institution. And institutions are slow to adapt. And I don't know if they will. So yeah, that was the best I could do to just wrap that up that quick, because I have so many thoughts about it. And they're so conflicting.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's interesting.
Hmm.
So you tell me what you do now. First of all, let me tell me what you do now.
Yeah, so I am a business and mindset coach for aspiring mom entrepreneurs. So I work with moms who currently work in a 9 to 5, or some stay-at-home moms who want to start businesses and want to create more flexibility and freedom and really fun in their life without giving up that career part of themselves.
That's you know, it's almost like, and this is what I heard. It's almost like you're trying to create a world for moms that would be perfect for children to have, right?
Mhm.
Right? Like that's what I heard.
Yeah.
Like I thought about like it doesn't have to be a certain way. Like that's what I heard. It doesn't have to be a certain way. Moms
Yeah.
don't have to go out and work 9 to 5 and then come back and take care of the family and everything else. They can make their own. They can create their own, right? They can create their own hours and do this. And that's God. It's my dream so much. But if you really think about it, that institution of the workforce is exactly what is. It's exactly what's keeping you from making decisions about where to send your son, right? I don't know
Yeah.
if that makes sense, but
Hmm.
it's this idea of a very constrictive paradigm, I guess, or institution, right? The workforce, right? And I just find that really interesting that that's where you are, and so what leads you there? So you first of all, I love that you do it. I can't wait to hear more about it because I just think taking care of moms is so important. I
Hmm.
think I think people and I have so many thoughts about that too. Sorry, I'll be all over the place. I'm so sorry. So
Love it.
what you go through high school, you leave middle school, you go to high school, you're playing sports, and the same thing. You're in high school and you have the same type of thing. Group of friends, you go under the radar. You're fighting for straight A's. Were you the valedictorian?
Salutatorian.
Slacker. Just
I
kidding.
know.
Sorry, I
Well, I
triggered you.
will. No, yes, you did. Because I took more AP classes. So my weighted GPA was so much higher than the other person's.
Got
But
it.
they
Okay.
go with the
Okay.
regular. And I did get one B in high school. So yes,
Anyway, so
it's part of my identity is
I,
it still
I'm so
lives.
sorry. I probably I don't even know you that well, and here I am making fun of you. Sorry.
You're all good.
So, and then what did you go to college for?
Psychology.
And did you practice psychology, or did
Hmm.
you like work at a school? What was your job?
Yeah. So, and this is also an interesting story, especially in the scheme of this larger education story. But I originally applied to college for business, but my sister, my oldest sister, didn't go. Well, she went to community college. My other sister went to Salisbury, and she went for business. And so I got in for business, and then I said, I can't do the thing that my sister's doing, right? Because there's this competition comparison. So I went to college with a psychology major because I had done well in that AP class and it was interesting. And that my minor then was business, which is just a funny combination of, I mean, it makes sense to me, but most people, don't do business as a minor
Mm-mm.
and psychology as a major. But it was just another one of those threads of this sort of my trajectory being planned by this decision when I was too young to be making these decisions anyway.
Yeah.
And doing it out of not spite, but out of this competitive edge where it was like, I need to forge my own path and show that I have this edge in this other industry. So I went to college for psychology. Then I went to grad school and got my master's in counseling psychology. And while I was doing that, I was interning at a corporate company in tech education sales, and there were a few silly things with licensing in Maryland to get my license. They actually changed the number of credits, like when I was ending my master's degree, and it would be like an extra 15K. It was just all these things that were sprung on me. And meanwhile, I was interning for $20 an hour at a corporate company and basically not doing too much for those $20. And I was like, I always say that I sold out to corporate. So I did a stint and got my master's and worked a little bit in mental health and dual diagnosis, but then pretty quickly got into the corporate world where it was very cush.
Okay. I have a few questions
Yeah.
that are coming to mind. And they're two different ones, but you go into psychology, you go to study psychology. Clearly there's a part of you that always had wanted to serve people, right?
Yeah.
Because, which is so interesting because you're driven by this, and I can't wait to get into what that looks like now because that's my next question, but were driven, your trajectory was kicked off by this competitive thing with your sisters that I just find so interesting. But you go into psychology and because you wanted to serve people, right? I mean, clearly that was part of it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Why do you think you wanted to serve people? This has been a question that I've had that started my journey here. Why do you think you wanted to serve people?
It's hard. I mean, it's a hard question to answer. I don't know why there was that thing. I always do know that I was very aware of other people's feelings. I mean, I think that's why I laid low in middle school, right? And could tell like the people, I was a good judge of character, the people to stay away from and the people to, attract myself to. And I think it was wanting to, have an impact in people's lives, just being kind of feeling all the feels for people, other people's plights or other people who are going through hard times, right? It's like, I think that I was always a good listener with friends. And I even do remember saying at one point that I would, want to just have a profession where I get paid to listen to people's problems, which is kind of counseling, right? It's like kind of therapy. So, and now coaching to some degree, but yeah, there was always this kind of attraction to being there for people and for them to get joy or feel better just from me listening.
Interesting. It's just the reason I ask is because, as you can gather from just the whole theme of my podcast, I'm always trying to figure this out for myself. Well, I think I have figured it out. I so vehemently fought for young people because I was trying to save myself, right? I think it was always that. And I didn't know that until recently, until I got out. Like I knew I cared. I knew I loved kids. I knew that there was nothing more important than I just have this I don't know, man. I feel for young people. I just feel for them. And the more I think about it, it's like why, it's why. I always want to know. Now I'm thinking about why, and not only why, but the impact it had on me to be in the situations I was in as a professional. Like I was just doing everything I could for a young person, 12-year-old kid or 13-year-old kid, and who just comes from a crappy life or is doing poorly in school or getting in trouble. And, because of the empathy that you talk about, or the compassion, like what I'm trying to unpack now is what did that do to me? Right? Like what I'm realizing is I was trying to save myself. right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's what I'm realizing now when I was working with these young people to love on them and to try to serve them. But the more I think about that, the more I wonder all those years of those kids and those families in my office, how did that impact my own healing and my journey and thing? I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's why I asked that question, because to me, it's a very profound exercise, right?
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
ask why you want to serve. I think everybody should want to serve. I think there's nothing more important than serving. But I just was curious, as for somebody who clearly had a much different experience than I did, at least, at that age, why serve? But so
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, this doesn't necessarily like answer that question, but I do like to bring it up. There's a book called Altruism. I don't know if you've heard of it or read it. I haven't read it, but I know like the back concept of it is that nothing is truly altruistic,
mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And which is, and I think about that like with the question of why, for me, there's definitely a part of it because it just feels good to see other people win for me, and to be a part of that story, right? To like, I always see when other people are winning, or not always, right? But the people that I worked with in the mental health space and in the coaching space, there is sort of this selfish piece to it that's like, you feel good when you're a part of the story of somebody winning or being able to help them turn it around. And they're doing all the work for sure. But there is this selfish piece of it that's like, well, I'm
That's
feeling
okay,
good
though.
from
That's
this.
okay, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Like,
I'm
like,
not,
uh, you're
whatever gets it
supposed
done.
to. It's okay
Mm-hmm.
to make your to want. Like, think about. Can you think of a better way to make yourself feel better? Like, at
Yeah,
least you're
for
not
sure.
going, well, I'm going to put you down to make myself feel better. I'm going to build you up to make myself feel better. I think about that
Yeah.
with compliments. Like, I think it's important to give compliments, right? I just think, because it's like that makes that person feel good and it makes me feel good because they feel
Mm-hmm.
good. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not lying. I'm telling you what I feel. Great job. I'm so proud of you. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so I get that, and it's something I've thought about often, the whole altruism thing. But that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
I'm curious now, because what you said is you like people winning. You like seeing people
Yeah.
win,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm there too. It took a long time for me because I was probably a hater for longer than I wanted to be. How does the competitive person in you do that? Did it ever get in the way?
So I should probably add the caveat that it's not just seeing everybody win, it's seeing the people win that I'm connected to, right?
Got it.
The people
Okay.
that I'm working with. And I say that honestly because I come from this competitive space where it is like it's very hard to see other people win and to not compare, like especially nowadays with businesses where you're comparing number of clients, or you're comparing like income and revenue and social media following and all these
Right.
things. Now, for the past probably, I'd say 7 to 10 years of my life, I've been very aware of that sort of competitive edge and getting a little kick from other people not winning and me winning, right? And that was my entire upbringing for myself of the competitive edge. But being aware of it and recognizing that like there's not a finite number of pieces to the pie, and it really is the more that everybody's winning, like we all can bring each other up. Like I understand that so vividly now, but I do have to fight those inner demons that are like, well, I have to be the best.
Do you find that, kind of along the same vein, do you find that you work with only women, you work with moms? Why is that so important to
Well,
to lift for you anyway? I mean, I will have our thoughts on it. Why was that so important to commit your life to helping moms live a better life?
yeah. Well, a little bit of business 101 about niches. So moms are my niche. But you wouldn't believe how many men reach out to me to work with me. And I don't know if it's, some people have said, or some men have said they want to be more like a mom in the way that they approach parenting, or they want, there's a whole host of reasons, but, yes, my passion is helping moms to have more fun and to create a life and business that they love, because I think there's a ripple effect that really impacts all of society when we have that. Moms are so incredible, but men find me and I have the ability to say yes or no, right? So I do end up working with men. So I say that about the niche thing because everybody's, has niche drama when they're starting a business, but it's like, no, you're like, the people who aren't ideal for you will find you, and then you can say yes or no to that person, and you're always, allowed to say yes. But working with moms has been really important to me since becoming a mom. So before becoming a mom, I had thought about motherhood as this is a really good niche of people who are pretty miserable and who are doing it all, and who I don't see many like asking for help. And I don't see, there's just so many things that from a therapy and coaching perspective, it was like, ooh, that's a really good niche, right? And then I became a mom and was like floored. So like surprisingly floored by how wonderful the experience is of becoming a mom. And I never saw myself as a mom. I just knew that, I would regret not having kids. So it was one of those things where it was like, well, might as well do it because I know I would regret not doing it, which is like not a great reason, but now I'm pleasantly surprised and it's wonderful. So after becoming a mom, that's when I really started working with moms, because I felt I didn't have the credibility, before becoming a mom. And actually, before becoming a mom, I coached leaders to prevent burnout. So it was an easy transition into helping moms because most moms are burnt out.
Mm-hmm.
So everything I talked about and all of the content and assets, really, like, I just apply that to what I do now as well. But, life can be so rich outside of the confines of how it should be, right? We were talking about it earlier, like this career setup of this 9 to 5, and, wanting to share that with more moms of like this, it doesn't have to be that way, right? It's like, there's other options out there. And so much of the time we don't even open ourselves up to the possibility of things being different. And we just kind of go with the flow, and it feels scary, and it feels like, we're not entrepreneurial, or we're risk averse, and I was all those things too. And then you just sort of get going and start to learn more about yourself and learn more about what you're capable of. And then it turns into something really magical. And so with moms, it's like, I just think that there's such an opportunity for moms to have more fun, right? To not be like the timekeeper and the diaper bag packer and the person who's always 10 steps ahead. I mean, I still feel like all those things most days, but then there's also this, I think, empowerment that comes with really feeling like I have control over how I'm spending my time, which is the most important thing in life, right? It's like how we spend our time is how we spend our life. And being super intentional about that, it's so fulfilling to be in control of that. And so many moms I talk to don't feel like they're in control of that, right? And then I think you get to a point where you really are able to see it, and not to say it's too late at that point, but your kids are older then, yep. And you missed all the cuddles, and it's like you were kind of crabby for the most of the years.
I love that perspective, only because if 1,000 men were listening to this, 998 of them would relate to that feeling of the fear of trying something else, the not being entrepreneurial. I mean, this is something that I deal with every day in my own head. I was never an entrepreneur. I don't feel entrepreneurial. I feel like a fraud at all times. You know what I mean?
Totally.
But I never thought of it, and that's why I appreciate these conversations. I never thought of like, I know how much moms do for a family, right? Like I know how hard that whole idea is for me, right? To look at the world differently, to look at my life differently, to look at my family and go, this is what's important. It's all that matters. I'm going to work like crazy to make sure this is my priority. And whatever that's going to take, I'm going to do. But I never thought of the mom having, because that's a whole nother layer that I don't understand. And I personally, I think of my wife. I think she's so, I watch her, she goes to school, she teaches every day, and she does a great job, and she's so committed. But now that I'm out, I'm like, you don't understand. There's more to life. And, and I know she'll say I'm not entrepreneurial, and I'm slowly trying to just give her, like, just to show support and go, maybe try this, maybe try this. I know there's things she wants to do that she's not, because it's what most people do, but especially moms.
Yeah. Well, we have a lot of really good reasons not to. Good as in, what our brains are telling us to keep us safe,
Yep.
good reasons. And yeah, it's little by little, and that's really what I do in my coaching business, right? It's like little by little chipping away at all of the stories we have about ourselves, to change them, because they're not written in permanent marker, right? It's ever evolving, and it's amazing to see what moms can do once they just start taking like little steps and learning a little bit more about themselves. And I would definitely recommend having your wife listen to my podcast. So that's what it's all about, right?
I
It's all
will.
about
I most certainly will.
slowly but surely reframing that story and telling it in a different way.
Let me ask you a question, and then I want to ask you about your podcast. But I'm very curious, as a person who I have a 5-year-old little girl, and I had the experience in my professional life, especially in my role as a leader in schools when I was an administrator. Every one of my bosses for most of my time were women and were my mentors, right? I have this, we're raging feminists here, right? Like that's just how we are. And I'm curious how much of what you do is driven by that. Like is it just moms, or is it about empowering women too?
That's a great question. And I'm a feminist, but it really isn't necessarily about empowering women, as much as it is trying to get moms to have more fun in their life, and to see that there is this stereotypical way to show up as a mom that I don't think is working, right? It's sort of the setting ourselves on fire to keep everybody around us warm mentality. And so I love the ripple effect of more women in business and, more mom bosses, women CEOs. I love that. But I also think that we're doing a pretty good job as women kind of turning things around. I really do think that that there's a ton of people leading that charge, and this is my way indirectly, I guess, to do it, but it's not what drives me.
Okay.
I similarly was always in a corporate world with all women leaders in tech education sales, and it was fantastic. So there's a bit of that, I guess, but I think that it's not necessarily what drives me.
So let me ask you this, because, and then we'll move on. And this might be a tough question, but one of the things that I'm trying to do, and you are too, is make the world a better place. In very simple terms, right? For me, it's about, if I can get young people started getting through some healing through their garbage early on, then they don't have to wait till they're my age to heal, right? And start a podcast, and and I want every child to be heard. I want every young person to feel loved and everything else. Because that will have an impact on the world. What does what you do for moms? What will that do for the world, do you think? Like in a perfect world, how is that how do you see what you do if you could get every mom as empowered as you want to be? How does that change the world?
Oh my gosh.
I know
it
it's a big
changes
question,
everything.
but it just
It
came to me
changes.
because, everything we do is about all you can control is you. Like, you can change the world by just being you and putting everything out there. Well, you're putting that out there.
Hmm.
How's the world going to benefit? There's no
Yeah.
right or wrong answer. I'm just curious what you think about that.
Yeah. So I think there is a right or wrong answer because the wrong answer is me leaving out all of the ways that it does change the world. But the top things that come to mind, I mean, the easiest thing is just that moms are so in touch with different things that are needed in the world, right? They're gaps where they create products, they come up with, they're creative, right? They know what's missing or what's needed in like the family unit, right? They just have a pulse on everything, very observant humans, right? They have to be 10 steps ahead.
The good ones
So,
are, yes.
yeah, yes. And so there's so much like intellectual value there just from being a mom. And that's why I say moms make the best entrepreneurs actually, because of everything that they are navigating and they've already proven, right? Just by running a household. So there's that. There's the creativity piece that I think a lot of moms don't even realize that they have. The other thing is that it has such a positive impact on the family in so many different ways. I mean, obviously, there's role modeling to the kids, right? And not that you have to role model working, that's not necessarily it, but it's role modeling this like leadership mentality, this confidence, this um, also this calm and composure. So with my clients, I'm very big on we're not trading one burnout for another. So when we start these businesses, we do it with boundaries and we make sure that it's not a grind, right? We make sure that like we're doing it within the context of how we want to run a business. And there's so much role modeling that happens there with the family. And what I've seen before too is that it also, whereas people really feel like it hurts a marriage sometimes, it can be so powerful for a partnership where, in a household, one client in particular that I'm thinking about who transitioned from being a stay-at-home mom for a few years with her young kids to starting her own business. It was amazing to see her partner and how he stepped up all of a sudden because she had her own thing and her own identity going. So it's amazing, like the ripple effect that has. And then I think that it's just, there's so much untapped potential because in my experience or in, kind of the conversations that I've had, there's a lot of opportunity for self-love in women in general and seeing ourselves differently or than we do right now, right? There's sort of this opportunity, and I'm sure it's with everyone. But there's again untapped potential in moms specifically really going for it, right? And facing their fears and seeing that if they are taking care of themselves in this way, and by taking care of themselves, I mean doing something on a daily basis that feels fulfilling versus just showing up and going through the motions, like that, it just has such a ripple effect, and I know that when you are coming home from work and just feel so resentful and frustrated and angry and rushed, like those things, they linger. And I tell a story before I was a mom, my husband and I, so he's always been an entrepreneur, which has been a huge part of me finding my entrepreneurial wings, because similar to what you were saying, for over a decade, he was like, Jenna, you could be doing something more. But instead, I was playing it safe and then just feeling resentful towards him when I would come home and he's like, spent the day at the botanical gardens reading a book. And I'm like, it's just like so frustrating to me at the time. And we actually had a system where when I got home from work, we had to go for a walk. We were living in Denver, and he wasn't allowed to talk to me until I initiated conversation. And what that did was it was like that moment where like work had finally kind of like fallen off my shoulders, right? And it was like I was ready to now interact with the person I love most in my life, right? And this was a system that we were like, okay, this works. This is great. And now looking back, I'm like, that is so not okay, right? For me to come home from work every day and to just be miserable and for me to feel so much resentment and anger towards him for living his best life. And now that I'm in a world where that isn't the case, right? It benefited our partnership so much, me finally doing something that feels fulfilling for me, that like I look back and I'm just so embarrassed, right? That was so many years of our life. And thankfully we worked out a system and we were able to get through it. But like, that's just not okay.
Are you
Now
embarrassed?
that I
You say you're
see.
embarrassed. Are you embarrassed because you lived a life that wasn't a life you wanted, or are you embarrassed by the system you put in place? Like you made your husband. Is that what you're saying? Like I really don't know. I'm just
No, totally. And I'm glad you clarified. No, I think the system was, I'm not embarrassed about coming up with
okay.
a system for us to manage our feelings or my feelings.
Okay.
I'm embarrassed that I was in a situation for so long that made me feel so, or that I just couldn't control my emotions around all that I was giving at work and all that was, feeling so depleted on a daily basis and then taking it out on him, right?
Yeah.
It's like he was the punching bag and I was just so depleted and couldn't do anything about it at work. So when I got home, it was like, okay, this is where I act like a child and complain about my life and do nothing about it. And that went on for so long until.
Interesting. The reason I ask about the system is because God, did you really touch a nerve with me about this idea of coming home and needing that time? Because I'm my wife is my hero, right? There's no better person in my mind. But when she comes home from work, it's a really tough time.
Mm-hmm.
And I see it in her. And that's why I was asked about the system, because I'm like, oh, that sounds like a great system. Right. And I was like, oh man, I hope she's not embarrassed by that, because I'm thinking we need something like that. Right. Because it's like, I watch it, like that's a lot, like especially when you're a teacher or whatever, like you're making 1,000 decisions a day. You don't, and you come home, you have a 5-year-old all over you. So that's why I asked that. Like I live that. My wife lives that. And like that's such a fine point to put on that whole thing, because it's like, we call it a cycle of sacrifice. You give and give and give at work, and then you come home and you give and give and give. And it's like, at some point, I see this so much in teachers and in nurses and things like that, where if they're not giving, then they're not living, right? Or something like that. Like their cup has to be empty in order for them to feel full, so to speak.
Yeah.
I just made up 2 ridiculously dumb aphorisms, but
they shifted a little bit, but yes, I'm picking up what you're putting down.
So anyway, how long have you been doing the coaching?
So I was certified in 2017, but I didn't leave my company and fully engage in coaching until 2021.
During the pandemic.
Well, yeah, after like the breaking point in the pandemic, where it was just so much giving. And, I was always in corporate sales leadership, and, I was always almost a therapist in that position. I think every manager is basically a therapist, the good ones. And so it was giving so much. And at that time, it was really hard, as we all know, like everybody had their own stuff going on and worries and concerns. And so it was really hard to manage that piece of it, and being there for my people, being there for what the company needed. And then also, where did I fall into that, and it was really hard. And that is what sparked really kind of a breaking point of just like, this needs to change.
Interesting. All right. So tell me about your podcast.
Yeah, so it is a labor of love, of course, as these things are. It is me sharing simple, actionable business tips, mindset shifts, kind of not a step-by-step strategy, but, because it's not linear, but all the bits and pieces that I've worked with clients over the year on to really not just like survive in their business, but thrive no matter what stage they're in. It's me giving that away, right? And me trying to encourage people and motivate people bit by bit. I know tons of people listen to podcasts, so it's such a good way to get into people's ears and between their ears to hopefully try and change the narrative. I know that my coach and her podcast is, changed so much for me and how I view myself and the tools I have to manage my own mind. And so I like to do that in the podcast. But mindset stuff and managing our mind isn't as sexy. So it's also very practical, like listen up, do this action, and this will get you one step closer. And really, really aiming at helping those folks who can't just quit their job, right? But who still deserve to start the building blocks of creating a life that they love. I believe it was the 4th episode is all about how to make work suck less, which the intention of that is like, you're probably not transitioning out of the 9 to 5 tomorrow, but there are so many ways that you can feel better right now and make it suck less. With a lot of the things that we, indirectly talked about with the not setting yourself on fire to keep everybody warm and not being a martyr. So yeah, I'm really excited to be able to offer this as a way for people to still get value for free.
Awesome.
Because I work with people one-on-one, and it's a very high touch coaching program, which means it's also not cheap. And I really, really was looking for like a way for people to consume these things, make these changes in their life without having to invest a lot of money.
Right. So what's the title of it?
How to Quit Your Job.
How to Quit Your Job. That's great.
Yeah. A mom's guide awesome. To creating a life and business you love.
That is so amazing. So I'm going to end with I have 2 questions I end with. One, I think, one is I'd like to give the background of why I asked the question. About 8 months ago, I was online, like most of us are. I was on Instagram, and I saw a reel, and it said, my therapist gave me an exercise to picture yourself standing outside your bedroom of your 12-year-old self, and then go in, and what would you say, right? That reel started a journey for me, because I don't know what happened to me, but I literally couldn't even read it without crying. I couldn't even get through it. There was something about it, and I look back and, I just think about that kid. I think about it just was a lot. So that started this whole thing. And I go, man, like, now I want to know what people would say to their 12-year-old. So what would you say? What would you say to your 12-year-old self right now?
Yeah. Gosh, it's such an, I don't want to say interesting question, but I'm living with my parents right now while we get renovations. So my room is literally like right across this wall, and like my husband and I are sleeping in that room, right? It's just like we are in it. So this is,
oh God, I just got a pit in my stomach for you.
Yeah. So it's like, I'm closer than ever to my 12-year-old self in that way, proximity wise. I think, and it's interesting because, I knew this question was coming too. And I think at any given moment, my answer could be different, but there's a piece of it that's like, stop taking life so seriously, right? Like, just have fun. And if not fun, like, just there's a bigger world out there, right? Like, it's not all about you, or it's not all about this test, or it's not all about that thing that happened at school. And I think, that's every 12-year-old's life. But, it's really just kind of like, loosen up a bit, right? Stop taking things so seriously. Like, it was just, every sports game was not a death match. That's not the right word. It was like, every sports game was this, the end of the world, right? And not even just like if we lost, it was like if I didn't do up to my standard, right? So it's like, it's a really hard, like, looking back, I think there was a lot left on the table, opportunity to just be a kid. Um, and not so much not be a kid, because I didn't have wild responsibilities, right? I wasn't in that situation. But it was, the time is fleeting, and what I would do now to go back to a life with less responsibility.
You do see the direct correlation between what you would say to that 12-year-old and what you say to your clients every day, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Because it's
Absolutely.
like everything, you put the perfect bow on this episode, because that's what you said. I want moms to know they can go have fun and everything is not the end of the world. So, okay. I figured you
Yeah,
did, but I just thought it was an interesting point.
and all of us coaches and everybody in the world, right? We're all client number one, right? So many of the things, like, the other thing I figured out in therapy was an inability to celebrate, right? Like, an inability to celebrate the wins, an inability to, you know, it just to celebrate my achievements. And I've achieved a lot, like, with my personality, like, you achieve a lot. And every time the achievement happens, once it happens, it's all of a sudden, oh, that's no big deal, right? And so I love what I do because it's constant looking in a mirror, and it's constant, like, I'm talking to moms, but I'm also like talking to myself,
Mm-hmm.
right? When I'm always giving, not necessarily advice, but I'm always, guiding, and everything I'm saying, I'm like, take your own advice, Jenna, take your own
Love it.
advice, Jenna. And that's, I guess, part of the good selfish thing as well of doing what I do, is that it's just a daily, hourly reminder of, how to show up a little bit better as myself. And being able to do that through this avenue of helping moms.
To me, I love that you're always client number one. I never heard that. So one more thing I'd like to ask is I want to, I'm trying to arm anyone who works with young people with the skills to help them begin healing as early as possible. So those of us who are parents of 12-year-olds or younger, whatever, of young people, or are teachers or work with young people, what can we do? What advice would you give them that would help them help a young person, a 12-year-old, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I mean, I guess the first thing that comes to mind is just be vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's one of the biggest things that we can do is connect with people in that way, and really that connection. I think about, like, the mentors in my life, and I think about the mentors that I've heard about in other people's lives, and it's never anything really monumental, right? It's sort of like, wow, that person probably has no idea the impact that they had. All they did was see me as a human. And I think about,
Mm-hmm.
somebody in my 6th and 7th grade year who, like, it was a teacher who was just, treating students like they're humans. But it had such a profound impact, and I think about him all the time. And so it is like that ability to connect makes such a difference to people. And also, I mean, of course, in the world that I come from, it's like, take care of yourself. You can't pour from an empty cup. So understanding that there's only so much you could give, and little things, little bit by bit, can change a human's life, can change a kid's life. But you got to put your mask on first, or else you're not going to be able to continue to make that positive impact.
It's interesting. I would always tell middle school teachers that they have to understand and respect the profound responsibility they have of being probably the first adults in that kid's life that's not going to be treating them like a kid or like their own. You know what I mean? Like, that's a huge responsibility, and it's really, really important. And I just love that you said it, because I just really connected with that, with what you said. That was really great. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you so much, Jenna Rykiel. I really, really appreciate talking to you. It was a wonderful conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
I did. And I have a ton of people I want to send your way that I know who are working with young folks and trying to do things like build confidence and help young folks work through trauma and self-image. And so I really feel like that
Please do. A good
collaboration.
The more conversations like this, the better. Speaking of vulnerability, that's what we do, right? It's like, I get on here because I want, especially men, to know it's okay to sit here and have this conversation, right? Because that helps, right?
Yeah.
So it was a pleasure. I hope we stay in touch. I will. Really was nice speaking with you. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Special thanks to my guest, Jenna Rykiel. You can find all of her information, her links to our website, her socials, and a link to her podcast in the show notes. Please don't forget to subscribe or rate the show or leave a comment or a review. Share with your friends. Anything that can get us to more ears would be greatly appreciated. Your 12-Year-Old Self is a Fairmount Media production, and it's hosted, written, and produced by me, Mike Nicholson. Questions, comments, guest suggestions can be emailed to your12yearoldself@gmail.com. That's your 12-year-old self with the number 12 at gmail.com. The theme song is Never a Worthless Moon by Yawns. Logo design by Rose Bear Arts. Digital marketing consulting by Krista Lemon. Social media consulting by Jessica Hawk. Special thanks to Ron Cornwall and Sarah Finney. And my profound gratitude goes out to my wife, Courtney.